Our guest today served 3 terms as a state representative in the Illinois General Assembly. He left the legislature after 3 terms to rejoin and serve in the administration of his legislative colleague and close friend in the General Assembly, Mayor Harold Washington, providing our guest the experience of having served with distinction and in key roles in both the legislative and the executive branches of government, both in Springfield and in Chicago. In March 1997, our guest today was appointed Cook County Assessor, then was elected to a full 4-year term in November 1998, and then re-elected in November 2002 to another 4-year term. In the 6 years as Cook County Assessor, our guest today's achievements and accomplishments have been solid, professional, notable, and many. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the Cook County Assessor and 2002 Citizen of the Year for the City Club of Chicago, Jim Houlihan. James? All yours, James. All right, take care.
Thanks, Jay, for that introduction. I see that marriage is making you briefer and more concise. I want all of you to know, those of you who were not introduced, your names have been entered into the Book of Kells. And a long Irish tradition will be granted property tax reduction for everybody in the Book of Kells. Now, I want to tell you a little story. I came home last night working on this speech, knowing that I was going to be talking to a group of friends, practitioners, and colleagues. So I was a little nervous. Had a wonderful dinner, fabulous pot roast. After dinner, I was watching the game. My son was there, my wife was there, and I said, just very casually, I said, Jay, you'll learn about marriage someday. I said, Ann, would you like to go and hear me talk about property taxes? She said no. And my son, who is just got engaged to a wonderful young girl, said, Dad, that would be no, not this Wednesday or any Wednesday in your entire life. I was trying to grasp for some straw. And I said, well, Mike, would you like to come? And my son said, well, you know, Dad, there is a part of me that would like to come. Mike is not here, but I'd like to introduce my wife, who is here, Ann Ty. Before we talk about the issue at hand, I think I just would want to ask everybody to take a moment of silence. These are difficult days. Some of our best county employees at work after 5 were lost. And it's a tragedy. And I hope that in all of the litigation and finger pointing, we don't lose track of the most important issue, and that is that we have witnessed a terrible sacrifice, and we ought to remember that. And so if everybody could give just a moment of silence and recall these employees, I would appreciate it. Thank you, and I'm sure their families thank you. Today, I'm going to talk about a specific proposal that I'd like to present that would address the problems of the rising property taxes and the problems of value increases in so many of our vibrant neighborhoods created by our elected officials. They are causing our longest and best residents great difficulty in being able to remain in the neighborhoods that they raise their children. But first, let me try to put in perspective that issue. Just about 2 years ago, I spoke to the City Club, and I concluded my remarks by asking for an open and public debate about Illinois tax policy. A debate that creates jobs, encourages affordable housing, and preserves the character of our neighborhoods, and most importantly, properly funds an excellent educational opportunity for all of our children. So now, I think you should ask me, how have we done on that venture? Well, let me report. First, as assessor, since I came in, I have been committed to one substantial integrating principle, and that is, the more that you know about what I do, the more likely I'll do a better job. We have put on our website initially all of the residential property. We followed that with all of the commercial and industrial property. And now this year in the reassessment, we're putting on photographs of each of those properties. It's part of our automation. It's part of our effort to be transparent. And I believe that we have been successful. Let me give you just a couple of figures that support that conviction. Over the last 3 months, we have had over 10 million hits a month. That represents over 125,000 individual visits to our website each month. I would say that suggests that people are getting it, are understanding that the office is open and that it's there to help people deal with their taxes. We've reclassified the mom and pops, lowering their assessments so that neighborhoods could be vital. Storefronts that were boarded up are now being renovated. Apartments above small storefronts that were vacant are now being added to the housing stock. We've reduced the assessment from a mixed level between 33 and 36 to 16%. We've created more affordable housing by increasing and expanding the Class 9 incentive. We've reduced the assessment for apartments from 33% first to 30 and then to 26. Right now, as we have lunch, the South Suburbs is witnessing a groundbreaking in Harvey. That's part of our South Suburban Tax Reactivation Program, where we reviewed over 14,000 parcels that were delinquent, abandoned, and not producing revenue for the county. Out of that, we identified over 2,500 parcels. Working with 36 different municipalities, we have selected the first group to begin with. 10 municipalities have acquired just shy of 40 properties. These properties have then been put out to market. We've had groundbreakings, and totally, the groundbreakings represent an area of about 1.8 million square feet of usable, now on the tax rolls property, representing just shy of $5 million of tax revenue to the county. That is property put back onto the tax rolls to help create some economic energy in the south suburbs. This project couldn't have been started without the help of Governor Ryan. President Stroger allowed me, as the assessor, to be the housing agency for this project. Together with Greg Carney, we have created a beginning of some economic activity in those troubled south suburbs. And certainly these are important steps, but they hardly go far enough. We all know the problems. It's not difficult to define. We're familiar with the issues. The state of Illinois' contribution to education is 49th, well behind such wisdom-producing states as Alabama and Mississippi. Sorry to offend anybody if they're from those states. As a result, Illinois ranks third highest in the amount of local money that goes for schools. Therefore, it's no surprise that our property taxes are out of sight. In addition, the state is witnessing a structural deficit. In simple terms, that means that what we do today will cost more because of inflation. Not doing any more, just what we do today will cost more than the increase, the natural revenue increase from inflation. This means that our fiscal problems are going to get worse, not better. We have to find the political courage to address these issues. We must find a way to understand that when our economy is transferring from an industrial base to a service economy, Illinois taxes are not structured to keep up. We will not grow with that change of economic activity. Illinois has one of the highest sales tax rates, but it's applied to one of the narrowest bases. Therefore, we are in the lowest group of revenue-producing states from their sales tax. We need to lower the rate and broaden the base, distribute the burden fairly and uniformly. There also is the regressive nature of our revenue structure. Those with modest incomes pay a greater percentage of their income than those more affluent. Once again, for some bashing, we are below Alabama and Mississippi in our regressivity. That's not acceptable. We've got to make a change. So those are the problems. And I would say this, that I think in this room, we know the solutions. We have to fund our schools responsibly. We cannot accept local wealth as the determinant of a child's educational opportunity. We have to protect our long-term residents, our best neighbors, from being driven from the neighborhoods where they raise their children. We must lower and broaden the sales tax, and we must increase the revenue we receive from the income tax. And we must make it more progressive. I have suggested that we lower the state sales tax rate, broaden its base, and eliminate the major exemptions, and this would increase the state revenues by approximately $3.8 billion. If we raise the income tax 1%, and we raise the exemption from $2,000 to $6,000 and expand the earned income credit, we in fact would raise an additional $2.8 billion. This would allow us to address the property tax problem and lower the property taxes by $4.5 billion. That's about 25% of the property tax bill statewide. We would then be able to eliminate classification in Cook County, and we would be able to spend an additional $1.5 billion bringing up the discrepancies of school funding that resulted from over-reliance on property taxes. Well, where are we? We've made substantial progress in creating an effort to make these changes real. Currently, this group has about 100 plus members. The Metropolitan Planning Council has taken a lead role. Chicago Urban League, the Illinois Education Association, the Illinois Farm Bureau, Voices for Children, Metropolitan Alliance for Congregations, and the Tax Policy Forum and Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. All have formed together to suggest that we need to make a change and to attempt to create the kind of energy that must exist to convince legislators to embrace these changes. What is our biggest problem? It's not technical. It's not the substance of the deal. The biggest issue, I believe, that is the hurdle that we must overcome is a lack of trust. Previous efforts have failed. The Eikenberry report, Netsch's proposal, others. And they have failed, I think, not because we're callous, but in fact because we lack trust. Think of it this way. The elected officials running for election don't trust the voters to accept a reasonable pitch to improve the way we fund education. They make campaign promises, more out of less. Local officials don't trust Springfield. They're terrified of sending their local property taxes down to Springfield and having it lost in the wash. State elected officials say we can't trust local officials not to raise the property tax once we make this change. Millions of dollars will be spent next election cycle. And I would venture to say some of those ads are already in the can. And they will talk about taxes, they will demagogue the issue, and they will distort elected officials' positions. This lack of trust leads to empty promises of no tax changes, leads to a paralysis that is just so devastating. It's a paralysis that we must change, and we're going to change. But in the meantime, we have to do something now. While we gather this support, this 100-plus group, maybe some of you can join in this effort. We must do something now about our neighborhoods that are suffering all throughout the county. They're suffering because of the over-reliance on property taxes, and they're suffering by the triennial reassessment, particularly in the city of Chicago, which we are reassessing as we speak. Let me show you a little graphic demonstration of what we're facing in this reassessment. That is our city. Rogers Park has seen an increase of 77% in the median, midpoint home sale over the last 3 years. Excuse me. I was stumped by this. Somebody left in the 3 years. It's the last 6 years since I was assessor. The median employment increase in salary is 22%. There's no wonder that people are angry. They just can't pay for that capital asset out of their ordinary income. These types of increases are occurring throughout the city in all kinds of neighborhoods now. Neighborhoods that differ in income and age and ethnic background, they're all experiencing this rapid inflation. Let me direct you to some of these up on the screen now. Where the increases have been, the median increases have been over 30% in the last 3 years. It's almost, as you can see, the entire city. There it is. Now, Brian, let's look at some of the neighborhoods whose assessment values have increased more than 50%. Now, I'm talking about median. That's midpoint of the assessment. Half of them are over this level. Roger Park, which I mentioned earlier, the assessed value in Lakeview has increased by 68%. In Streeterville, the increases are 74%. But it's not just an isolated North Shore issue. Greektown has gone up by 96% over the last 3 years. Canaryville, 72%. Inglewood, 80%. Bronzeville, 123%. That's over the last 3 years. And these are not the only examples we can cite. Look at these emerging dots that'll come up on this board, I hope. These increases are even more dramatic if we look at the time I've been in the office, 6 years. Let me just run through them so you get the sense of where this is going, if you haven't gotten it already. Rogers Park, 65%. Streeterville, 122. This is 6 years now. Greektown, 351. Canaryville, 149. Englewood, 119. Bronzeville, 229% increase over 6 years. This is a problem throughout our city and our suburbs. Over this period of time, the increase in residential market value has far outstripped commercial value increases. Thus, part of the shifting burden has been from business onto residential for funding our schools. Our estimates are that in 2003, for the very first time, the residential taxpayer in the city of Chicago will pay more than the commercial taxpayers as a group. We need to give the homeowners some assurance that they will not be hit by arbitrary or wildly inflated increases. Our assessments must be accurate, but they must also be predictable. We need to guarantee that they will not be driven from their homes by triple-digit increases and resulting huge tax increases. We need to provide people with some confidence, and we need to provide those stable communities with a sense of insurance that they are not next on the hit list. Accomplishing this, I believe, must be the first step in restructuring the total tax system and eliminating the classification system in Cook County. To protect and preserve our neighborhoods, I am proposing the Neighborhood Preservation Homeowners Exemption. This exemption, which will be a modification of the exemption that currently exists in Springfield, will ensure that the taxable value of no one's home will increase by more than 7% in any 1 year. We will do this by recasting what already exists and was started in 1977, the homeowner's exemption crafted in Springfield. That was based on that assessment level in 77, addressing those economic times, and it took $4,500 off the rolls. Works out to a savings of about $350. has no impact on our currently increasing assessments because it's already used up. The revised homeowner's exemption would have a base year of the 2002 and would limit the taxable growth to either 7% or the actual assessment, whichever is less. This would, in fact, act as a taxable assessment ceiling, avoiding the large jumps in value that are certainly a function of the market and the triennial assessment practice. In times of market appreciation that's rapid, the taxable value of a property will lag behind the actual value. But in times of slower growth, that taxable value will close the gap. The neighborhood preservation homeowners exemption will provide taxpayers with certainty and a protection from increases that are a result of a wildly increasing real estate market. In addition to allowing long-term residents to remain in their homes, this plan enables them to welcome neighborhood improvements. One of the worst things that I witnessed was going out to a community meeting when I was first in the assessor's office. And some of the best neighbors were arguing against improving a slum building. If you can imagine that. Because they felt with the improvement of the neighborhood, their assessments would rise and their taxes would increase. We just can't tolerate that kind of fear. Homeowners will have a benefit in that they will know and have a predictability for the budget for the cost of home ownership. And while the long-term goal must remain to be the reduction of the over-reliance on property taxes, restructuring the way Illinois funds schools, we must immediately stop the increasing tax burden that is so painful to so many of our neighbors. It is threatening to destroy the city that is, I believe, the most vibrant place in the United States. We need to take this first step also because it will give us a sense of momentum to take the fight down to Springfield, to change those issues about how we fund schools, and to create a better Illinois. And with your help, I believe we can do this and start now. Thank you.
Wow, that was one of the great speeches the City Club has had, not only this year, but in the last few years. In case you couldn't take it all in, this Saturday night, November 1st, 7 o'clock on CAN TV, which if you happen to live in Bronzeville or Rogers Park, Lakeview, Greektown, some of those other neighborhoods that were flashed on the screen, is Channel 21. You'll have an opportunity to hear Assessor Houlihan's remarks once again. So that's Saturday, November 1st. And a lot of pressure on that young man from your office. I think you called him Brian. I think he deserves a little applause. Tough spot to be in, Brian. Okay, we have time for several questions. So who would like, there's a microphone right here in the middle of the room. Who would like to ask the first question of the assessor?
If you come with your PIN numbers, we can give you immediate relief.
Here we go. I see a few coming up. You don't have to live in those neighborhoods that were cited on the screen to ask a question. And just identify yourself, please.
My name is Carmen Caldero, and I wanted to say thank you for your very precise explanation of
I think you got to turn it on.
Yeah.
Try now.
Hello,
Much better. Good.
I'm Carmen Caldero, and I wanted to say to the assessor, thank you for your concise explanation of school funding in Illinois. having been an educator in another life, I found it not only interesting, but it's led me to think of some other questions. And that is the fact that schools are funded basically with local money creates unequal schools, where the wealthy have well-funded schools, where those students can go on to the better schools. You have poor school districts with underperforming students. And I don't see it as, it's not even just a black, white, brown issue. It's a class issue, because certainly in downstate you have poor school districts with the same results, underperforming students. And my question, not necessarily to you, but more of a rhetorical question, is this constitutional?
That's the question. Would you let the assessor answer the question, please?
The simple answer is no.
And what can we do
More
about it?
complicated answer is it's been tested in court, and it's been found to be constitutional. So we must amend our answer and call it unacceptable. We have in Chicago Heights schools that are barely able to keep their doors open, and their cumulative tax rate is 19%. We have schools in the northern part of the city, or take the northwest suburbs as a better example. In Inverness, those schools have a cumulative tax rate of 6%, just shy of 6%. They have a lot of property wealth, and they have a full-time program, computer labs, a full service. We should not want to take away from any school, but we should not have that disparity, and we should do it in a more equitable way so everybody has excellent opportunity for a quality education. Thank you for your question.
Okay.
Thank you. Doug?
Thank you. First, the compliment, and that is to say that I think you're the most thoughtful and courageous elected official in the state of Illinois today, and practically the only one who's
Oh, you can stop there, Doug. That's only one per
Oh, I'm
person.
still praising you. I'm still praising. And practically the only one that's willing to drive this issue forward, because you and I have both been in this a long time. This has come around and around and around. So I applaud you for taking it up and making it part of the public debate. Now, having said that, I'm getting emails probably every other day from parts of the city, from taxpayers who are irate. What I'd like to know from you, because you and your office are out there every day, how real is this tax revolt? How serious and visceral is this with the individual citizens about their reassessments, about their tax burden? Let me walk in. I'd like to hear how you walk in your shoes with the response from the citizens.
Well, let me, by way of answering that, introduce some of the most fabulous people in the world. My staff, Kevin Burden, who's the chief deputy, a whole group here who was put together. Michelle's on the media, Pam Hughes, who's my general counsel, my entire staff. John Fallon has been out at these community meetings. Where is Dana? I will tell you, it is very intense. Some of my staff have been spit upon. It is different than it was 3 years ago, because people are outraged, but they're beginning to get that it's not just an individual problem. They come in armed with sheets from our website, and they say, well, okay, I realize that I'm like all the homes around me, and they can see the pictures now. I mean, so it's graphic. But they say, I hate this. I'm going to leave this. And they give you terrible stories. Now, how great is the volume? It's not anecdotal. You see it from the statistics there. It is throughout the city, and it must be changed. I'd like also, while I'm thanking some people, I'd like to thank two people who are outside of the office who have been very helpful to me. One is Paul Riley, who heads up the tax policy forum. He couldn't be here. He's in litigation. Paul, I had asked to come in and work in the office. He said, I can't, but I will commit to work with you in this tax policy forum. He's spent countless 40-hour weeks creating the venue for me to think about and debate these kinds of issues. And the other person I'd like to personally thank is the first person that I work with when I came into the office about this problem. She was at the housing department, and we created the first city CHAP program, protecting people that they could borrow. Nobody wants to borrow. It runs against the human sense of getting rid of your mortgage. We had the first CHAP program. Shortly after that, not because of that necessarily, she became the mayor's chief of staff, Julia Stash. We worked side by side on the bigger picture, and now we work together. Julia's at the MacArthur Foundation, and that organization has helped the Tax Policy Forum initiate the debate and has helped many neighborhood groups try to deal with these issues. So, Julia, I want to thank you for all of your support and help.
Thank you. Next.
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night at 8:30 on CAN TV, Channel 21, in Bronzeville, Rogers Park, and throughout the city of Chicago. You mentioned the issue of trust, and I'm thinking about many suburbs, both affluent and middle class, where those suburbs spend or provide for their education with maybe 85 to 90% of those educational funds coming from property taxes. And those suburban areas, and many of the residents in those areas may complain from time to time about their own property taxes, but they like the idea of local control, which gives them, to a large extent, through referendum and otherwise, control over their funding, and they think control over curriculum, et cetera. And I'm wondering how you're going to persuade state representatives and state senators, not to mention the residents in those areas, that they should buy into a program of an increased income tax, a lower property tax, increased sales tax, all of which they see as giving up control over their education in those areas. So, and two, do you think that'll happen next year? That is, do you think a tax swap might go through, and would it be signed by Governor Rod Blagojevich?
For him whom nothing is written, Lawrence of Arabia, everything is possible. So I think it will happen.
Next year.
Now, yes. Now let me give you a short explanation on the school funding issue. We've got it backwards. We have the principal funding of education coming from the local communities, and then the state is an add-on. In those communities, it's a very minimal add-on. The state should guarantee an adequate level of funding for all kids. Then the local community can decide to spend local dollars to add to that basic level that is adequate. That's a big difference in the way it's done now. Now, we look at what can a local community raise, and then we supplement it. And it's just backwards. One item that I think is often overlooked. Those suburban communities get very little state aid, and they are very high in their interest, many of them, in their local taxes. Of that $4.5 billion, a significant portion of that will go to reduce those tax bills of those people in those neighborhoods. And yes, they will pay more in income tax, but they will get significant property tax relief. So I think it can be done. And I'll be happy to send you charts, sheets, documents, background papers, and give you all the information possible.
And you'll appear on Public Affairs throughout the city of Chicago, so we can talk to you
Sure.
about this at length.
Sure.
Thanks.
Next, please.
Hello, I'm John Pritcher of Community Investment Corporation. We do multifamily rehab lending, and I want to also praise the assessor and the assessor's office on the programs that have provided incentives for people to maintain the existing buildings that we could never afford to rebuild at today's costs, through Class 9, through SRO, and then through the recent reclassification. I guess my question, Jim, is what is your guess on what's going to happen next year when the first of the two reductions in multifamily assessment levels kicks in at 30, when the bills kick in? I guess it kicked in this year.
Right.
To 30, reducing from 33 to 30% for multifamily rental property, and then down to 26% in '04, payable in '05.
I might also point out, for full disclosure, that Mr. Pritchard is a terrible basketball player, and I have beaten him on many occasions in his youth. Here's, I think, what will happen. With the commitment to reduce apartment assessment levels, and by the way, I think we should go further than what we've done. We've just primed the pump. I don't think there's any rational reason that we should have a different level of assessment or taxes based on whether you choose to live in an apartment or in a home. A quality county has to have diverse housing options. We have to have more of what the market needs. We have to have houses by where jobs are and jobs where by houses. You know, you write that down for me and I'll get it right. But you get the point. We got to have more housing. We got to have more affordable housing. If we have more rental units on the market will drive down and make more affordable housings available. And it's my hope that those reductions will act as a stimulus to the marketplace to create more units. You know the figures. Over the last 3 years, the rental units in the county have been stagnant. No new additions net.
Lost.
No new additions. In fact, there's been a loss. You've got to be forceful when you say these things. So we've got to make a change. We've got to make a change. So I want to work more closely with you and try to create that kind of movement.
We have time for one or two questions? Fine. John, just don't go one-on-one with them.
No, I wouldn't want to give any secrets away either. Jim Ascott, Chicago Association of Realtors. Congratulations on spearheading this program. One thing that we haven't heard is what we do about commercial buildings. Commercial property taxes have been escalating. As you can tell, our absorption rate for office leasing, all the industrial, has been down. And so when we're raising the taxes, the rental rates have to kind of lower themselves to make it effective. What are we doing to change that on the commercial level?
Jim, actually, what you're describing is not quite accurate. Yes, you're precise in saying that there is a reduction in office space leasing and that there are vacancies and that the industrial is slow in Cook County.
And leaving.
And leaving. But if you look at the assessments of industrial have been fairly flat. And with the increasing base, actually, taxes for industrial properties have been going down. If you look at commercial, in a number of commercial areas, while there have been increases, they have been less dramatic than residential, and therefore there has been that shift of who funds education onto the homeowners. Now, I am certainly one who will stand up here and say, this bind we got ourselves into of using classification, the de facto classification, and then making it statutory, authorized by the Constitution in 1970, might have made sense when Cook County was the region. And you might be able to explain it that there was a business need for additional services and therefore additional tax burden. It makes no sense now. We need to make Cook County competitive with the rest of the region. We need to make the state competitive with the rest of the states around us. One of the guiding principles in driving this tax debate was to look at where we were relative to other states in the region and the country. In property taxes, we're way above the median level. Income taxes were way below. For us to have, and this is not just preserving neighborhoods and helping individual homeowners, for us to have a thriving state economy, we've got to be at the midpoint so that people don't make location decisions based on a tax issue. We shouldn't have developers thinking of land as a throwaway commodity and plowing over farm fields in Will County when we've got, excuse me, Mayor, when we've got wonderful available, developable properties on the south side, in the south suburbs. We've got to reutilize those. We can't think of land as a disposable commodity like a pop can. We're going to strangle ourselves if we do that. This step, I think, gives us the best chance to create the restructuring, to lower the burden on everybody, and business should be a prime beneficiary because they pay more than their fair share. The development in Bolingbrook is a wonderful thing. I'm not against it, Mayor, but we've got to use the land we have, and if we have sprawl that continues, traffic will strangle us. Let me close with one story. I first got on, I went on a Today Show. I was really pretty excited. I'm the assessor now, and I was there, and we were there with George Ranney and a mayor from Oak Brook, and we were talking about the regional plan. And Tom McCracken was there talking about the RTA. And so I gave my pitch, and I kind of lulled off and wasn't paying much attention. I forgot we were on live TV. And so Tom McCracken and George Ranney started talking about how to make a 2-hour commute an hour and 15 minutes, maybe an hour and 30 minutes. And I said, well, that's stupid. Of course, Callaway looked and said, Jim, you have some strong feelings about that? I said, well, I do. Just look at what George Ryan did. He spent considerable dollars on the Strangler, west suburbs, Storino. Your people know what it's like. We spend $40 million. What does it do? It moves the backlog 15 minutes out. It cuts it down by maybe 7 or 10 minutes. We've got to rethink our economic policy, our government activity. We can't manage everything, but we should incentivize the development and the use of our resources so that we are a healthy area and not dead with transportation. Thank you.